Hey everyone, welcome to Snowpal's Software Development and Architecture Podcast. We have a special guest with us today. We have Richa Bhardwaj from Delhi. With over a decade of experience, Richa has been crafting exceptional digital experiences using technologies like Ruby on Rails, React, React Native, and Node.js since 2008. Her expertise extends across the entire software development lifecycle, from establishing and managing teams to making critical technical decisions and ensuring the success of numerous projects. Richa has an impressive track record of building production-ready applications, creating products from scratch, migrating existing solutions to improve performance, executing rapid transitions to modern frameworks like React and Next.js, and developing robust APIs with a keen focus on documentation and testing. Richa has led teams in various high-profile projects for global clients. Today, we dive into her wealth of experience to gain insights from her journey in the ever-evolving landscape of software development. So welcome, Richa. Thanks for taking the time to having this conversation.
Thank you, Krish. Thank you so much, and it's been pleasure, being part of one of your podcasts.
Okay. Now that let me do a quick recap. In the last podcast, we talked about a number of different things beyond a whole lot beyond our introductions, right? Different stacks, technologies that Richa works on, that I work on as well. We talked about code reviews, comfort zones, getting out of comfort zones, how uncomfortable we are. Some of us are living in those comfort zones, and why it's important to find your motivation. However, you end up finding those motivations to get out of those comfort zones, right? So that was a lot of that we discussed in the last podcast. Definitely do check it out. The nice thing about some of this podcast, the conversations that Richa and I are having, is you could sometimes listen to them in any order and still get a lot of value out of them. But with that said, I do recommend that you go in sequence if you can, just so you get context to it, because we're going to referencing things that happened and transpired in the past, right? So that's a quick a recap of what we discussed earlier. Getting into this podcast, the questions I had for Richa. These might sound like Richa's going to be like, these are very easy questions. So I'm going to try my best in making them a little bit harder as we go. But you're going to obviously blow it out of the park. But just for the purpose of people watching and listening to this, I'm going to start with the simplest version of these questions, right? So, Richa, I'm going to play these roles as we go, right? These are not rhetorical questions, obviously, but I'm just going to play that role as somebody who's asking you these questions, because it's always easier to ask than answer. Is there a need it's a two-part question, and you can answer them however you want to answer them, right? Full stack developer and a polyglot developer, right? Now, before I ask you the question, this is a very loosely used term. I mean, there's a lot of terms used very loosely these days. Like, I want to hear your thoughts on who do you think constitutes a full stack developer?
So, full stack developer, theoretical part, who knows backend and frontend, and the practical part, a developer who can handle both the part of the software world. So, I started as a Ruby on Rails developer. It had the view part. So now if I develop a Ruby on Rails application where I can handle the controllers, model, and HTML, CSS, JavaScript, am I a full stack developer? Because I'm able to create a full software development using just a single tool. And now let's break it into Rails APIs and a front end single page application kind of framework. And I'm able to connect it. Now I become a full stack developer. So I never thought about it theoretically. Once I was a full stack developer, I realized, oh, now I'm a full stack developer, to be honest. So I felt like, why a full stack developer is needed to create any application is because
Now, I'm going to interrupt you there. Sorry to
mm,
interrupt you there. Before we go into why we need it, I just want to add something there, right? But I'm going to ask before I add my 2 cents to it. I want to ask the second part of the question. Who in your mind um, this is the less interesting question. Like who? I guess it's not even a question because I wrote it down. The question is slightly different. I was just going to ask a polyglot developer, right? People ask me what is a polyglot developer. Sure, somebody who works in multiple languages and stacks. But in your mind, how would you define like who do you? When do you? When did you find comfort in calling yourself, if you were to call yourself a polyglot, because you do work on multiple things? There was a point probably you were like not calling yourself polyglot, I'm pretty sure, much like myself. And then there came a point where like you feel more comfortable calling yourself that, right? If that
Yeah.
question even makes sense.
So just remove the full stack, replace it with polyglot. And that was the story with me. Once I learned several technologies, after that I realized, okay, now this is polyglot developer. I guess, developers, at least like me, because we know each other, we don't know so much about each other. So I'm not sure what are your thoughts about it. But a developer is working towards building something, towards solving something. And in the end, it becomes an application, a software. And to do that, sometimes it's just one tool and a given environment with all those conventions defined by that technology. Or sometimes it is a technology working with some third party APIs or third party tools that you can plug in with several other technologies. Sometimes it could be something for the customers on the view side, but a lot is happening on the back end, and there are other challenges like scaling, like handling a lot of traffic, etc., 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 and handling a lot of background jobs, etc., etc. Now, does a single technology work for all of the problems that you're trying to solve? If not, now you need to club all those, and how they are different by just syntax, by
Right.
just the naming convention, by just, if they are async in nature or synchronous in nature. It just depends on that. In the end, you wrote some code and you made the solution work. you know Request coming from here, traveling through another wall, etc., getting response, building something out to give it to the customer. And then you didn't realize, when you have completed that product, you have learned A, B, C, D, E. and
Absolutely.
and does that call you a polyglot developer? Then yes, I am. Because you were not only working with A, you were also working with E at the same time, and some other tools, not a complete technology, a separate technology, but some other tools, and you connected them. You tried out to solve it. So I personally feel a developer is always a developer. And these are some marketing terms that could highlight your resume on LinkedIn or in the inbox of the recruiter, where you write some terminologies. And in the end, I feel that you're doing the development thing.
I think I
What
couldn't.
I got about it.
No, I cannot say it any better, right? Brilliantly said. Let me add a couple of more things to it, right? I think you alluded to it at the top of your response, which I couldn't agree more with as well. Because you were writing Rails code, right? And then there was a Vue tier, right? So if I may ask, was it ERB files or was it HAML files at the time? ERBs?
I started When I started, there were ERB, then
How do you like
the
them?
game and a lot. The ERB ones. I started as a fresher at that time. They were uncomfortable to work with because I was comfortable with HTML syntax at that time. And now, even when I'm writing the React code, I'm adding ERB codes there.
Oh, you are. So you are on the other side. For me, I never connect. Sometimes as a developer, you connect with the language or not. We'll talk about it in a different conversation. I was just trying to ask a question because I was thinking about that. Okay, now back to what I was trying to say. Just add to what you said earlier, right? Uh, uh, just because I can write some ERB files building a Rails application, I don't know. Even I don't feel that that makes me a full stack developer, right? And I say this because Again, the audience for this conversation would be a wide range of folks, right? Including folks who are in the space of recruitment and hiring. And I think it's important to know, because when somebody asked you to fill a position that says, I need a full stack engineer, full stack developer, and then you ask somebody, and people actually genuinely believe they are. It's not like they are saying, they're not giving you falsified information, right? Because in their minds, Lord, people are thinking, hey, I wrote UI code, I wrote backend code, middleware, so I am a full stack engineer, right? Like you said, I think your answer was perfect. Theoretically, yes. On paper, sure. But practically, not so much, because where do you find where is the orientation, right? Where do you feel like you think more back end than front end, or vice versa, right? Just making, there's many paths to this entire architecture. We're just calling front end back end just to keep the conversation easy enough to understand, right? If I wrote a few UI pages, I don't think that makes me a full stack developer if I were a backend developer, and vice versa, right? I have worked with folks who are brilliant UI engineers who write an API here or there, write a few endpoints here or there, and then start to genuinely believe, yep, I'm a full stack person, right? Now, the terminology is unimportant, like you mentioned correctly. It's how you sell yourself and publish yourself, right? But the problem I have is not so much with the terminology, right? From a marketing and a sellability standpoint, more from the learnability standpoint, right? Meaning, if I start believing I'm full stack when I'm not truly full stack, right? Then I'm actually not trying to go further along the way in what I need to do to learn those items. If I were a backend engineer and I just wrote 5 pages on Rails, and Rails, is it's an opinionated framework, as we all know. But I've done more and more work outside Rails, I've realized a lot more languages and technology stacks are opinionated. It's somehow, interestingly, they have not been branded opinionated, right? And I will talk to it and as we go through. So Rails somehow got that brand saying, hey, you're an opinionated framework, right? So just by writing a few Rails views, if I started to believe I'm full stack, I would never become full stack, because I'm not going to go out and find that learning that I need. And the same thing in both directions, right? So while what you call yourself is less important in your mind, make sure that before you believe that you're full stack or polyglot, that you've done enough work in those areas, right? And enough work, not just the length of time, but the complexity of what you've done. Because if I write like build 20 UI pages that all look reasonably similar, meaning I had like 4 components, but I built 20 pages, it's not really 20 pages. That's like one page repeated like 20 times, right? So
Put it in
I
a
don't,
good flow so that, other 100 can also build those kind of 20 pages.
right? Absolutely, right? So I think what the two of us are trying to say here is uh, the definition on paper, it maybe is less important, but we have to understand what we think each of those terms means before we start presenting ourselves as that. Because even inadvertently, you don't want to sell yourself the wrong way, right? Because it's going to, just want to be straight up honest to yourself and to the people you're working with, right? So the follow-up, the question itself I had there was, is there a need to be a full stack engineer? In other words, if I'm out of college or I'm switching careers in engineering, or I've been doing testing, I get into development, or however it is, right? One of the first questions that pops up is, I mean, should I just start small? I mean, is it even small if I start with, I use the word small. I'm going to question myself, challenge myself with that word. If I just went with backend, or just went with a front end framework, just doing front end work, is it considered small? Is that a place I should start? Or can I do something small that's on both sides? Like I pick up a framework that does everything, but just do a little bit of everything, the front end, the middleware, and the back end and whatnot, right? So the question really is, should I aim to become a full stack developer? Like, is there a simple yes or a no? What are some factors I should consider? Who would you recommend become a full stack engineer versus just a front end or a back end engineer?
Yeah. So, you prepare these kind of answers based on your experience. What I feel, why I learned HTML, CSS, if I was okay with, just handling the logic side, that was because these are, for example, I want to be a doctor, but I want to be a heart specialist. But if I have no idea how my liver or kidney is going to work, if heart does something different, then there might be a trouble. So that is, I feel, is also these two parts, front end and back end. They really need to know what front end is, the back end needs to know what front end is actually doing, and front end needs to know what actually back end is doing. So choose any path if you're just starting, but there needs to be a primer course that you need to go through for the latter. So you can choose front end, but I feel we won't be able to do much with the front end. You will, you'll be able to just work ticket by ticket as a front end developer if you have no idea what back end is all about. And same goes for back end. You'll be working API by API, maybe, or logic by
Right.
logic. And you have no idea what I need to send, why my format, my response format needs to be like this, because this might be a problem for the front end if
I'm going to
this is.
play the, sorry to interrupt, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, right? I'm
Okay.
going to say the opposite and ask you why it is wrong, right? Now, let's say I join a team, right? Let's say Richa is a fantastic React engineer. Richa is managing everything from a React standpoint, right? You need somebody to build an API, right? And again, let's say at Snowpal, we have published these APIs, right, for folks to consume. So let's say I'm an API developer. You're like, you know exactly what to do. You're close to the customer, meaning we are building the product together as like partners, but you're closer to the customer in terms of understanding the market, the product management, yada, yada, yada. Now, if I try to understand how the UI works in the case of how you're building the React pages, whether you're using micro frontends or not, whether you're using Relay or Redux, what your state management looks like, uh, is that not going to hurt the overall productivity of where we want to be? Like, you need me to churn out an API with 35 endpoints. Uh, how does it matter to me how you're consuming that response? You're like, Richa is saying, Krish, I'm going to ask you for get me, I don't know, I'm going to take a restaurant, right? Get me all the, this is the menu for a restaurant, right? Get me all the entrees, for instance, right? We agree, we have a contractual agreement. I'm going to create a JSON structure. And, just as a small segue for folks, as we get deeper into the conversation with Richa, both of us are developers at the end of the day, right? I mean, what I mean is not so much title, right? You'd be architecting, you're leading teams, but what I mean is at the heart, we are developers, right? So we're going to do all of this more hands-on, right? We're going to take a JSON and just write this thing up. What is writing? I'm sure you're already in your mind, you're thinking about a JSON as I speak, what the JSON is going to look like. I have no doubts that in your mind, you're wondering what the JSON is going to look like, right? So why would I actually want to know anything about what you're doing? I mean, is it not, what if I said, Richard's great. We all should know what everybody else is doing, but can I just get my APIs done, my endpoints? We have a contract, we have the HTTP request, the headers, the response. We have it on Postman or Insomnia. We have an open API file. You just give it to me, Chris, just go do your job. I do my job, and then you consume that, right? And we stub it out so you don't wait on me and whatnot. Is that not better?
This is better or not? So when building a product by myself, and what kind of expectation we have through from the UI, it is definitely good to work, collaborate as a team and define the rules, the how request is going to be to look like, how response going to be look like, to look like. But I guess this example is specifically for a service that Snowpal is providing as a product. So this is an API product, and it is not working with the UI. UI is not the part of that product. UI, sorry, the APIs, the product that you have built for consuming APIs might be needing something else, not the backend.
I'm
Maybe
going to make
what?
it difficult for you. I'm going to make it
Okay,
difficult for you.
okay.
Let's say, let's say we're not selling this API to anybody else. Let's say the two of us are building a solution, correct?
Now we are a team. Yeah, yeah.
Right? We are a team. That's it, right? You need to consume my responses. I need to entertain your requests, right? So let's
Mhm.
say we are the two of, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question after a minute, right after your response. So not for anybody else. You're not even building, let's say, no React Native, nothing. React straight up a web application. You're building a bunch of pages. And there's no simple correct or wrong. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to impress upon the idea, right? When
That
people ask
kind
these questions, right?
of mindset we
So
are having.
in this case, is it okay for me to be ignorant of how you're approaching the problem?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, now you working on the back end, the UI team working on the front end, and me being a bridge in between the back end team and front end team. And you guys are working ticket wise ticket. And there are developers who want to work ticket by ticket, sometimes who want to be led. And that's okay. That's totally okay. You're good at that. It's just that you want like, and that's my personal point of view. My mindset used to say that I won't be able to bring a lot to the table as ideas if I do not understand the other part of the world. I'm very much dependent on the other guy from the UI team who is, if not available, I need to keep my ticket in progress till he's or she is able to work on that part, because I am an API
I
developer.
think
And
that's I think
you
that's
know
a brilliant point, right? I was going to go there. Point is, there's no right or wrong answer. One more time, right? We have to find what makes the most sense for that team. But I just want to say that, in my opinion, I think both are okay, completely all right, right? But the last point that you're trying to say there is a very important point. What if the UI developer took a couple of days off, right? You're a small team. You don't have like 7 people doing the same thing, right? And then Richa's like, Krish, can you just go fix that React bug, or go, make a small enhancement, right, to one of those pages. If I did not have a clue how that stack worked, I wouldn't be able to help here. I mean, I'm a developer, but unfortunately, given that problem, I was not able to make a contribution, right? So the point is, it is important or not important. I think it depends on your team. Depends on your team and the size of the project you're working on as well, right? If you have like a fair number of people doing each of these things, so one UI developer wasn't there, the other UI developer is going to chime in and get the job done. But if you're in a smaller startup where there isn't one person for every role, right? Usually you're wearing multiple hats, and you have to be sort of cross functional as well. So I think your earlier answer is literally that, right? It never hurts to be cross functional. But I just want to play the devil's advocate, because you might find yourself in a larger organization, a large product company. I mean, having done that for a while, I can speak to it. You don't have the luxury necessarily on working on seven different things. It's almost like you have to your focus is like a horse, right? You're going to be doing the same thing every single day. You're doing interesting things, complex things. They get very deeper. All of that. With all that said, it is going to be, I've done work where I've done 18 months of the same type of things, right? Where I've been writing code, thousands, hundreds and thousands of lines of code, but very specifically to a particular service, right? At the time, it was not called a microservice, but if you were doing it today, it'd be called a microservice, right? Where you have no distractions at all. So I think it's good to be equipped. And from a team standpoint, like you said earlier, you should have an idea, even if you don't exactly know the whole 9 yards. If someone said, go hop on it, go fix the React bug, or a React engineer is in the team and the TypeScript developer is not there today, you're like, hey, can you just go see why this endpoint is not returning this attribute in the response, right? You shouldn't have to wait till that person is back, even in a small team, right? Would that be right? Like, your thought process is, if I'm in a team, it doesn't have to be small, but just, as a dramatic example, the smaller the team, the more important it is, imperative it is, that you better know that everything else that's happening in the team.
Yeah, and I guess that's how this full stack developer role came. And then we have separate DevOps, and now again mentioning AI, but with all the tools, all the requirements that AI brings to building a software, DevOps also needs to merge with full stack. Maybe there's another term for full stack plus DevOps,
Right.
but you need to learn a little bit, around Kubernetes, around Terraform. You need to have a primer course there as well. That is just, could be your growth path. part, as you mentioned, is it necessary? Not at all. You really do not need to learn front as well as back end. And here I'm bringing out another point to also include DevOps to this list of front end and back end, because you don't want to be stuck. And I have worked with
You know,
several
I have some questions there, but I'm going to blame you because you brought DevOps. So please, sorry, go ahead.
sure thing. Yeah, it's being it's been great to be part of this discussion, and it's actually opening up another ways to think about a specific problem. And how can you actually, like, it was great. Thanks for being a acting for acting as a devil advocate. It actually changes how you think about a problem, working for a corporate, working for startups, being really lucky to work with a lot of startups. uh, I guess I got another answer for myself, that that's how, I guess, it made me comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it was a startup world. You get
Perfect, right?
so many challenges, so many different things to learn in such a small time, that you become very familiar with. And even after so many years, when interviewing for a specific job, and the client is, pointing out one specific technology that you have not worked with, you do not have enough experience with XYZ, and that's why we prefer to choose something else. Why would I work for, work with a specific tech stack for the rest of my life? I want to learn something new, and that's why I could see that this extra thing in your job description, that I would like to learn, at the same time putting in value for the rest of the tools that I already know. So me bringing value for your project, but at the same time getting a learning experience for working while working for your project. um
And you said
you
something
know
there that I'm going to jot down for the next session, because you mentioned something that I've talked about plenty of times, I think, in my podcast, which is uh, this is from a recruitment standpoint, right? You're like, hey, Krish, have you worked on upgrading LifeRay version? Plug in the version number. I don't remember, 7.3.5 or whatever to 7.3.8, right? Now, let's say I worked on LifeRay, hypothetically, I don't remember the version numbers, when it was version 6, for instance. You would have done an upgrade from 5 to 6, possibly, right? You're like, hey, I'm familiar with LifeRay upgrades. But the question is, no, no, no. The client actually wants somebody who's actually done an upgrade from LifeRay 3, whatever the version number I just hypothetically made up, to that specific version. And that was your example too, right? If you have not done that, could that be a problem, right? I think that is worth a discussion for sure, because to me, I have fairly strong opinions, right? I mean, as developers, we have strong opinions about a number of things. This is me in a mellowed down version in a podcast. But when you make these decisions at real time at work, you are some of us are a bit more animated, right, if you will, right? You can't, it's hard to have this it's all in good intent, but it's, to be honest with you, it's hard to maintain this composure, because I'm like, no, Richa, why should we do it, as opposed to, hey, Richa, should we be doing it, right? There's just a slight change in tone just because we are working together, for instance, right? But that's a digression. But I want to talk about
yeah.
that recruitment issue, not issue, sorry, that challenge in recruitment, because I've worked with recruiters very closely, much like you have, I'm sure, as well, and I know some of them at a fairly personal level, and I kind of relate to those challenges, right? That the challenges that they work with in finding somebody who's done the specific upgrade, of finding people who may have fit that exact bill as is, right? So we just to do a quick recap, we've talked about polyglot and full stack. We've talked about what it means, why you may want to be one or the other or both, for instance, because here we are talking as two people who are full stack polyglot engineers. You know what I mean, right? Truly so, just by virtue of the work we've done. But again, it doesn't have to be that way. You can find the balance, right? Find what you enjoy. Because I actually genuinely, even though I do full stack work, I enjoy server side work a whole lot more. It's just something that I would, if I woke up, you woke me up in the middle of my sleep and said, Krish, write code. What do you want to write? It may not be, the UI code that I might, I can write it. I've done it all the time. That's because you have to do it as a company, smaller company. You can't afford to have three people do three different things. Like, before I say more about it, do you see yourself like as one side of the stack who likes the other, who can do both? Or do you feel like, nope, I don't have a preference. I actually like both sides equally?
Okay, no offense, Internet Explorer, but that was the reason.
It's not there anymore, so nobody's going to take
So, so
offense.
the,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was the only reason where, working with the responsiveness and behavior, uh, UI gave me hard time. But now, like, it's fun. It's really fun working with
So
so
you're
many.
unbiased. What you're saying is you don't have a preference to do server versus, like, if someone woke you up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock and say, Richa, write some code. Would that code be UI code or would that code be server side code?
So my answer is very, related to some feminism.
Okay.
Back end code is beautiful, easy to maintain. It has all those, you know.
This is the time I'm gonna keep quiet. I'm not gonna say a thing. You're gonna have to say everything. Sorry.
No, okay. So my personal opinion, it's really easy to manage backend code compared to all those, weird aligned UI files. That what I do not like about UI files. Like no matter how uh, atomic nature you make for a component, it still becomes a little awkward compared to the backend files. And I really like writing code as if I'm writing English. And it's really easy to maintain the backend code compared to front end. That's one reason why I prefer a little bit the backend side,
Okay.
not the front end. Also, something is looking like this, and now let's make it look like this.
Right.
Versus there's a bug and resolve it, debug it, troubleshoot it, uh, optimize it, or write the logic from scratch. These are kind of better challenges compared
Okay.
to the
But from an
cosmetic.
excitement standpoint, you're like, you don't have a strong preference one way or the other, right? Did I get that
like
right?
like sometimes I've tried this exercise of just putting my fingers on the keyboard, even write something, and then I'm not talking to anyone and I'm just writing. It
Right.
doesn't matter it's the back end or the front end, but it's a real quick exercise for procrastinating if you're just thinking if I should do back end or front end or what I want to do. Just just start with a comment, this is what I want to do, and then I'm okay with both.
Perfect. Which is,
Definitely I enjoy.
I would love to be there, but sometimes there is a truth, and then you can change the truth, but it's not the truth, right? I've always thought to myself, why I've done a fair bit of like UI work over the years, for definitely more on the server side, but still a fair bit of UI work. But anytime when I'm building something, people call me. It's just like you. I seem to sort of gravitate more towards the back end, and I kind of fill the role where you need help. You need to build something. Sure, I'm happy to help, chime in and help. But I just want to get to know, which is nice. I would love to be that, where I looked at both of them exactly the same way. Sometimes I spent like 6 to 8 months just doing like React work, right, for somebody else, for instance, right? Uh, we'll talk about it as we get to that part of the conversation. But I just want to know, so I want to socialize that with people, right? So if you have a certain like that you're like, hey, I want to be doing more of this, a little bit of the other, then you find something that satisfies your need. But otherwise, if you're like Richa, you're like, hey, you know what? I actually like both of them almost equally. So, which is a great place to be in, to be honest with you, right? Which is a great place to be in. For some of us, we have to work our way to finding that place. But ultimately, it should suffice to say that you got to know every piece of this puzzle. And I can tell you, before we roll in the next session, when you working with a larger organization, right, you sometimes have the luxury to know less than what you uh, not less. What I mean by that is, there's more people, there's more help, right? So there's a luxury of having a certain focus. But when you're working for a startup, and I saw someone's title the other day on LinkedIn, it was quite hilarious. As a startup founder, and the list of titles he had was very, very, there's a bit of humor to it, and I could actually relate to it, right? Because you don't have a systems engineer, you don't have a database, architect, you don't have a UI UX designer who's different from a UI developer. You don't have an architect that's different from a server-side engineer who needs to do that too. You mentioned DevOps. You mentioned Dockerizing applications, deploying them, putting them on Kubernetes K8s containers. Well, I mean, it'd be great to hire a DevOps engineer, but that is also changing, right? Uh, one of the podcasts I'm will be doing in the next month or so is about platform engineering, right? And I didn't know much about platform engineering. So I was like, the guest, he's going to talk about where DevOps was, how it kind of made its way from DevOps to DevSecOps to, like, say, platform engineering. And what does platform engineering mean for larger organizations? And do smaller teams even need to have a notion of platform engineering, right? We can, I'm sure we'll touch on all those topics, but I just mentioned that because, you mentioned DevOps, for instance, right? So it's important. How much of all of these is a different topic and a question altogether, right? But do you need to know them at all? I think so, right? Even though I asked the question just to the opposite, because if you
Right.
don't have it, you're going to be in some dicey situations. Like, for instance, what if you needed to fix a bug at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday in a startup, right? The rest of the team is working remotely. We are a remote first company, like a lot of the companies are. So everyone's working different time zones. We have a few core hours. So I cannot wait till Richa starts her day the next day. And Richa cannot wait for Krish to start his day the next day, right? The subsequent day as well. Richa's like, okay, you know what? Let me clone, I have the repo. Let me go fix the bug, create a pull request. Only thing you would do is wait for me to review it because I've been actively working on the back end, and I would wait for you to review it so you can make the React comments. You can react to, no pun intended, right? React to the code that I've written, the React code that I've written, and make some comments about it and push it in, right? So that's what the two of us are saying. I mean, I know I said a lot of things to recap our conversation, but is that more or less accurate, Richard?
Yeah, totally. We agree on the same point that yeah, it's always good to at least know the story, the background of the thing.
Okay, so if you're watching this, you're wondering, should I be full stack? Should I be polyglot? Should I be front end? Should I be back end? Should I be middleware? Should I be doing databases, caching? What Richa is saying is you got to know everything. Just kidding. What we're both saying is you
Yeah.
don't have to know everything
Stop
on day one.
sleeping,
Just start.
just start
Sorry.
everything. I said stop sleeping, start learning everything.
Yeah, don't sleep, right? Just start small, build little by little, write the hello world, whether it's a UI hello world or a server side hello world, and then find your way through all of these tiers, essentially, right? I think we talked polyglot, full stack, what it means, what we might recommend for folks who are trying to make these decisions, whether it's out of college, you've done this for a few years, you're trying to make a switch, or you're not in the world of software and you're now decided with the advent of AI and everything that's super cool. You know what? I need to take, dip my toes in this as well, right? With this, I'm going to hit pause on this. So thank you very much to Richa Bhardwaj for answering all of these questions.
Thanks, Krish.